Emily Carter stood at the edge of the hospital corridor, staring at the room where her sister lay motionless. Machines beeped in rhythm, a chilling lullaby that played day and night. Isabella had been in a coma for 6 weeks. A single accident on a rain-slicked highway had turned the lives of everyone around her upside down. Behind her, the quiet click of leather shoes echoed. Her mother's voice followed, soft but steel-lined. "Emily, we need to talk." Seat. In the conference room just down the hall, the Carter family sat around a sterile white table. Her father's hands were clasped, knuckles white. Nathan Blake, Isabella's fiancé, was there too. Eyes unreadable, suit pristine, like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. "Isabella may not wake up," her mother said, matter-of-factly. "And the Blake family expects a wedding, a merger. Our businesses are intertwined. If we pull out now, we risk everything." Emily blinked. "You're not seriously suggesting—" "You'll take her place," her father interrupted. "The invitations have been sent. The venue's paid for. You look enough like her. You'll wear the dress." She felt like she'd been punched. Her heart thudded against her ribs, wild and disoriented. Nathan finally spoke. His voice was calm, cool, a businessman's voice. "It's a formality. No expectations, just appearances. After the ceremony, we can go our separate ways." Emily stared at him. There wasn't a trace of grief in his face. "You loved her," she whispered. Nathan didn't blink. "That doesn't change what needs to be done." She looked around the table, hoping for someone to stand up and say this was insane. But all she saw was desperation. Corporate fear, social panic, the terror of public embarrassment. Her family was ready to sell her soul to keep their empire from crumbling. That night, she sat by Isabella's bedside, holding her sister's lifeless hand. "I'm not you," she said, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I could never be you." But the next morning, she said yes. Not because she wanted to, not even because she believed it was right, but because everyone around her made it clear she didn't have a choice. And so the countdown to a wedding that wasn't hers began. In borrowed shoes, with a borrowed life, and a heart that already felt broken. The seamstress fussed with pins, tucking lace around Emily's shoulders, while she stood motionless in front of a gold-framed mirror. The bridal gown shimmered in the light, a custom Vera Wang made for Isabella. "It fits like it was made for you," the seamstress said with a smile. Emily's lips twitched. It wasn't. Every inch of fabric felt like a betrayal. The delicate embroidery, the pearl buttons, even the scent of her sister's perfume, still faint in the fabric. It wrapped around her like a lie. The planner walked in next, clipboard in hand. "Rehearsal dinners confirmed for Friday, and the press release goes out tomorrow. Everyone is thrilled you're staying strong during such a difficult time." Staying strong, she thought. That's what they called pretending to be someone else while your sister was unconscious in a hospital bed. Nathan hadn't said much since the agreement. He kept his distance, cordial but cold. At public events, he held her hand. In private, he barely looked at her. She preferred it that way. One night, at a charity gala that Isabella had once championed, Emily stood alone on a balcony, watching the lights of the city below. She felt like a ghost, floating through someone else's life. Nathan joined her, his presence quiet but impossible to ignore. "You don't have to smile all the time," he said. She glanced at him. Is that advice from the man who smiles at reporters but doesn't speak unless he has to? A beat passed. Then he said, almost gently, "You're not her, Emily." Her jaw clenched. "I know." He took a slow sip of wine. but you're handling this better than anyone else could." She didn't answer. She didn't know if it was a compliment or a warning. Later that week, she visited the venue, a historic mansion with marble columns and manicured gardens. It was all so perfect, so curated, so fake. The wedding coordinator led her to the altar to rehearse her steps. "Just imagine the moment," the woman said, beaming. "You, walking toward your future, toward love." Emily looked straight ahead at the empty space where Nathan would stand. Her future, her love. Neither of them truly belonged to her. Back at home, Emily sat on the edge of her bed, the wedding dress hanging on a mannequin in the corner of her room. It looked like a statue, elegant, cold, unmoving. She whispered to herself, "This isn't my life." But the dress didn't answer. No one did. The hospital room was exactly as she left it. Too bright, too quiet, too sterile. Emily brought fresh flowers, the same kind Isabella used to buy for herself every Sunday. White tulips. She arranged them gently in the vase by the window and pulled a chair closer to the bed. Isabella looked peaceful. Still. Too still. Emily leaned in. "You used to say I didn't understand the pressure you were under, that I had no idea what it was like to be you." She let out a breath. "I still don't, but I'm wearing your dress, holding your bouquet, walking in your shoes." The words hung in the air, unanswered. She stayed there for hours, talking. About childhood memories, about how strange Nathan seemed lately, about how she hated champagne but pretended to enjoy every sip in public. Emily didn't know if her sister could hear her, but the act of speaking filled the hollow space inside. That night, she dreamed of glass, a ballroom filled with mirrors, her reflection duplicated 100 times. She danced alone, spinning between versions of herself she didn't recognize. Then she saw Isabella at the edge of the crowd, watching silently. When Emily reached for her, the mirrors shattered. She woke up, sweating. The days moved quickly after that. Fittings, rehearsals, interviews. Every moment choreographed to perfection. Every conversation rehearsed to avoid the truth. Emily smiled when cameras were on her. She nodded at strangers who called her brave. And every time Nathan touched her arm in public, her skin prickled with guilt. But then, there were moments, rare and quiet, where she saw a different version of him. One evening, after a photo shoot at the estate, they sat outside by a fire pit, both too tired to pretend. The wind moved through the trees like a whispered confession. Nathan broke the silence. "Did you and Isabella ever fight over anything real?" Emily raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. A guy. A secret. Something you both wanted." Emily hesitated. "We didn't fight. I stayed out of her way. She was the sun, and I learned to live in the shade." Nathan looked at her, and something shifted in his eyes. Not warmth, not coldness. Something in between. "I never knew she had a sister until a year into the relationship." Emily blinked. "Seriously? She never talked about you. Not really. Just said you were quiet, smart, reserved." Emily swallowed hard. It shouldn't hurt, but it did. He tossed a small stick into the fire. "You're nothing like her." She stood abruptly. "No, I'm not." And for a moment, she saw it. A sliver of herself reflected in his eyes. Not Isabella's shadow, but something different. Someone different. She wasn't sure if it terrified her or tempted her. The mornings began to feel different. The world still moved like a machine, but Emily no longer felt entirely mechanical inside it. There were tiny interruptions in the numbness, moments when Nathan would glance at her too long, or when silence between them felt less awkward. more intimate. She didn't know what to do with that. At the final wedding tasting, they sat across from each other, surrounded by planners, florists, and assistants. The noise buzzed around them, but Emily barely heard it. Her mind was fixed on how Nathan swirled his wine slowly, staring at the crimson in his glass like it held answers. "Too rich," he murmured after a sip. Emily blinked. "The wine?" He shook his head. "All of it. The flowers, the food, the orchestra. It's so overproduced." Isabella loved a spotlight. "She did," Emily agreed, more gently than she meant to. A quiet laugh escaped him, soft, self-deprecating. "I used to think it was magnetic. Now it just feels exhausting." Emily studied him. "Why are you telling me this?" Nathan looked up. His eyes, for once, were unguarded. "Because I think you're the only one here who sees any of this for what it really is." She didn't know how to respond, so she looked away, pretending to study the centerpiece. A massive tower of white roses, overdone like everything else. Later that evening, while walking back to the car, Emily nearly tripped on the gravel path. Nathan caught her by the elbow, just a second too long. "You okay?" he asked, voice low. She nodded, brushing hair from her face. "Yeah, thanks." But neither of them moved. There it was again, that tension, invisible and electric. It lived in the pause between breaths, in the space between two people who weren't supposed to feel anything for each other. And yet, Nathan let go first. "You should get some rest." That night, Emily stood in front of her bedroom mirror, brushing her hair absently. She didn't recognize the woman staring back, not because she looked like Isabella, but because she didn't look like herself anymore either. The next morning, she received a box at her doorstep. Inside, a pair of ballet flats, pale pink, simple and soft. No note, just her size. She held them like they might disappear. At the bottom of the box was a receipt, not from a bridal boutique, but from a small local shop that Isabella used to frequent for dance shoes. Emily pressed the shoes to her chest. She wore them that afternoon to the rehearsal. Nathan noticed. Of course he did. Their eyes met across the aisle, and though not a word was exchanged, Emily knew he had sent them. Not for Isabella, for her. And that was the first moment she truly feared what was happening, because something fragile and dangerous was beginning to bloom between them. Something that no one had planned for. Something she wasn't sure she could stop. Emily stood by the window of the bridal suite, watching the sun sink below the trees, painting the sky in soft streaks of lavender and gold. The mansion was quiet for once. Guests had gone, vendors had finished their rehearsals, and staff moved like whispers in the hall. Tomorrow, she would walk down the aisle. Her wedding dress hung on the wardrobe door, pristine and waiting. Its presence was oppressive, a reminder of what she was about to do, and who she was pretending to be. Her phone buzzed on the table. A message. No sender. Just a video file. She stared at the screen, thumb hovering. Then, slowly, she tapped play. The screen filled with a dimly lit hospital room. The camera was shaky, as if held secretly. And there, in the center of the frame, stood Isabella, alive, moving. Her body was frail, her steps uncertain, but she was dancing, slowly, dreamily, her arms floating like ribbons in water. There were tubes in her arms, monitors blinking in the background, but she moved with intention. Grace. Pain. Emily's breath caught. Her sister was awake and dancing. And then, Isabella stopped. Her chest rose and fell quickly as she stared directly into the camera. Tears glittered on her cheeks. She leaned forward. "Emily," she whispered, voice cracking. Don't marry him, please. You don't know everything. Come to me, tonight." The screen went black. Emily's hand trembled as she lowered the phone. Her heart pounded, every beat deafening. The walls of the suite seemed to close in around her. She didn't think. She just moved. Within minutes, she was out the door, running barefoot down the corridor, dress forgotten, hair wild. She called a car from the mansion's circular driveway and gave only one word to the driver. "Hospital." The ride was silent. Streetlights blurred past the windows. Her mind raced, replaying the video over and over. Isabella was alive. She had spoken. She had asked her to come. When Emily reached the hospital, the nurse at the front desk looked up, startled. "You can't—" "She's awake," Emily said, breathless. "Isabella Carter. She's awake." The nurse hesitated, then checked her screen. Her expression shifted. "Room 421. They just transferred her out of ICU." Emily didn't wait. She sprinted down the hallway, shoes in hand, until she reached the door. For a moment, she stood there, unable to breathe. Then she pushed it open. Isabella sat up in bed, pale but alert. An oxygen tube curved beneath her nose. Her hair was tangled, her eyes rimmed in red, but they were open, focused, alive. When she saw Emily, she broke into a choked sob. "I didn't know if you'd come." Emily crossed the room in 2 steps, falling into her sister's arms. They held each other, trembling. "You danced," Emily whispered. "I saw you." "I had to reach you," Isabella said. "They wouldn't let me call. I'm being watched, controlled." Emily pulled back, stunned. "By who?" Isabella looked away, voice barely audible. "Nathan." Silence fell between them like a crashing wave. Isabella turned back. "There's something I need to tell you, Em. Something I should have said a long time ago." Emily's voice cracked. "What is it?" Her sister took a long breath. "The accident. It wasn't really an accident." Isabella's hands gripped the edges of the bed as she forced herself to sit straighter, her eyes wide with a new, terrifying clarity. "It wasn't an accident," she repeated, her voice hoarse. "I know you won't believe me, but I have to say it. Nathan, he did something to make it happen, to make sure I wouldn't be able to stop this wedding." Emily's breath caught. "What are you talking about?" she whispered, almost not wanting to hear it. Isabella closed her eyes for a moment, gathering strength. "Before the crash, I found out something that changed everything. Nathan had been hiding things from me, a lot of things. He was controlling every aspect of my life. Our relationship was never what it seemed." Emily felt a chill in her spine. "Controlling? But he loved you." Isabella shook her head, her fingers trembling on the bedspread. "No, he loved the idea of me, the idea of what I represented. Our families, our business deals, our image. And when I started to figure it out, when I started asking too many questions, he became more aggressive, more desperate." Emily could hardly process the words. This couldn't be true. Nathan? The man she was about to marry? The man who had seemed so distant and yet protective, who had looked at her with something like care? "Why didn't you tell me?" Emily asked, her voice breaking. "I tried," Isabella whispered, "but he had already isolated me. And then, the night of the crash, I was trying to leave. I had booked a flight. I had everything ready. But he found out. I don't think he meant to hurt me. But he did. He made sure I wouldn't be able to stop it." Emily's pulse hammered in her ears as her mind raced. The crash, the twisted metal, the wreckage. Was it really intentional? Was her sister's coma part of Nathan's plan? Her hands were shaking, and the walls of the hospital room seemed to close in. "What do I do now?" Emily's voice was barely a whisper, like she was asking herself as much as Isabella. "You need to stop it, Em," Isabella said urgently. "You need to stop the wedding before it's too late. Nathan's using you to cover his tracks. He doesn't want to marry you. He just wants the deal, the merger, the public appearance." But everyone thinks I'm Isabella. I can't." "Yes, you can. You have to. You're not her, Emily, and this isn't your life." Isabella's words cut through Emily like a knife. The weight of the gown in the other room, the rehearsals, the smiles she'd forced, everything suddenly felt wrong. She had thought she could do it, that maybe she could be strong, keep up the act. But now she knew. She couldn't. She looked at her sister, whose eyes were wide with a mixture of fear and hope. "How do I stop it?" Isabella's expression softened, her voice barely a whisper. "Expose him." Emily hesitated. Expose him. The words felt like a bomb ready to explode, but the moment they hung in the air, the decision started to solidify. Her sister had suffered. She had been forced into silence, and Emily had been manipulated into believing in a love that never existed. She couldn't let it go on. The moon hung high in the sky, a silver witness to the chaos that was about to unfold. Emily didn't sleep that night. She couldn't. The weight of what she had to do pressed on her chest like a heavy stone. But it was the only path forward. She had to stop the wedding, stop Nathan, expose everything. At dawn, she left the hospital, making her way to the estate. The air was crisp, the morning quiet, but inside her, everything was a storm. She knew the venue was preparing for the event of the year. Flowers were being arranged, tables set, staff in motion. It was all for a wedding that wasn't hers, for a man who wasn't hers. Her heart pounded with every step she took toward the altar. When she arrived at the mansion, the doors were open, the hallways brimming with people. No one noticed her as she slipped past them, unnoticed for the first time in weeks. She headed straight to the private study, where Nathan would likely be preparing for the ceremony, his thoughts as meticulously calculated as his every action. He wasn't there yet, but the room smelled of his cologne, sharp, expensive, and cold. Emily paced, her thoughts spinning. How would she do this? How could she confront him after everything? Would anyone believe her, after everything they'd been through? Was this just another trap? A voice broke through her thoughts. "Emily." Nathan stood in the doorway, impeccably dressed, a calm smile on his face. But there was something in his eyes, a flicker of tension, something too calculated to be genuine. "I didn't expect to find you here," he said smoothly, stepping into the room, his eyes never leaving hers. She didn't answer, couldn't. The words felt too thick in her throat. She could see it now, how everything had been manipulated. The rehearsals, the smiles, the false promises. All of it was nothing but a means to an end. "You look stunning, Emily," he said softly, his gaze briefly flickering over her. "Isn't this what you've always wanted? To be in the spotlight? To take her place?" The way he said it, as if it was all part of a deal, made her stomach churn. "No," she replied, her voice firm, her heart finally beating with purpose. "This isn't what I want, and it's not what Isabella wanted either." Nathan's smile faltered for the first time. "You don't know what you're talking about?" "Oh, I do," she said, stepping closer to him, her voice cold now. "Isabella's awake. She remembers everything. She knows what you did, and I'm not going to let you get away with it." For a moment, he didn't speak, his gaze unreadable. Then he stepped forward, a hand reaching out as though to calm her. "You're being emotional, Emily. Let's just forget all of this. No one will believe your accusations. Your sister is still recovering, and I'm not going to be a pawn in your game," she interrupted, her voice shaking with anger. "You're not marrying me, not for business, not for any of this. I'm ending it. I'm telling everyone the truth." His eyes narrowed, a flash of something darker crossing his features. "You don't want to do that," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You really don't know what you're messing with." Emily stood her ground, meeting his gaze unflinchingly. "Try me." The silence between them stretched, thick with tension. Finally, Nathan let out a deep breath, his posture stiffening. "You think you can stop me?" he asked, his tone hardening. "You think anyone will believe you? You're just a replacement. Always have been." Emily's hands balled into fists at her sides, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Not anymore." Nathan looked at her for a long moment, as though calculating his next move. He didn't say anything more. He just turned, walking toward the door, the weight of his arrogance making his steps heavy. "Do what you need to do, Emily," he said over his shoulder, his voice low. "But remember, you're nothing without me." Emily stood there for a long while after he left, the words echoing in her head. But they didn't matter anymore. She wasn't nothing. She was free. And she was going to fight for that freedom. The grand hall was buzzing with excitement. Guests in their finest attire murmured to each other, laughter and clinking glasses filling the air. The orchestra began to play, a soft, swelling melody that signaled the beginning of the ceremony. Nathan stood at the altar, immaculate in his tuxedo, his eyes scanning the room with an air of quiet confidence. The guests turned their heads as the doors opened, but no one appeared. The aisle remained empty. Whispers began. "Isn't she ready? Where's Emily?" Nathan's eyes flickered toward the entrance, his jaw tightening. He glanced at the clock. The ceremony was supposed to start in 5 minutes, and he couldn't afford any delays. The guests were waiting. His perfect image was on the line. But as the minutes ticked by, his frustration deepened. Still, no Emily. The tension was palpable now, like a storm about to break. And then, from the back of the hall, a figure appeared. A single woman, dressed in a simple white dress that caught the light like an ethereal apparition. It was a figure Nathan didn't expect to see. Emily. But she wasn't in her bridal gown. She was in something simple, almost fragile. But somehow it suited her more than the opulence she had been forced into. Her face was serene, and though she was walking toward him, she wasn't looking at him. Instead, she was looking at the floor, her steps deliberate, each one a statement of defiance. As she reached the altar, Nathan's breath caught in his throat. He was frozen for a moment, stunned. The silence in the room had become deafening, and all eyes were on her. Emily paused at the altar, turned, and without a word, handed Nathan a thick, cream-colored envelope. The letter was sealed, its weight heavy with meaning. "What is this?" Nathan asked, though the question came out less certain than he intended. Emily said nothing, only gave a small, sad smile before turning and walking toward the side exit. She didn't look back. Nathan tore open the letter with trembling hands. His eyes scanned the words, each one cutting deeper than the last. The message was brief, but piercing. To Nathan, the dance was never mine to perform. You asked me to take her place, but I never could. I never will. This is my last step into the world that was never mine to claim. The wedding is canceled. I'm free now, even if that means I'm alone. Emily. The room was still, a vacuum where the breath of disbelief hung in the air. Nathan stood there, staring at the letter, unable to process what had just happened. The orchestra's music died down to a faint hum, and whispers began to ripple through the guests, confusion spreading like wildfire. Nathan, his hands shaking, looked up just in time to see Emily slipping through the back door. Her figure disappeared from view, just as the life he thought he had was slipping through his fingers. And in that moment, Nathan understood. He had lost everything. Days passed since the wedding that never was. The mansion was quiet now, the guests long gone, and the life that once seemed so certain had shattered into 1,000 pieces. Emily hadn't spoken to anyone since that night. She needed space, time to breathe, time to reclaim herself. It was late afternoon when she found herself in a vast open field on the outskirts of town. The world was wide and empty, the sky a canvas of soft pinks and oranges as the sun began to set. She stood in the center of it, alone, and for the first time in weeks, she felt no weight on her shoulders, no expectations, no fear. The wind whispered around her, tousling her hair, and in that moment, it was as if the world had exhaled with her. The hum of the universe seemed to pulse through her veins, calling her to move. She took a step forward, and then she danced. The movements were slow at first, hesitant, as if she was still learning to move with her own body, to trust the rhythm of her heart. But soon, the dance grew more fluid, more confident, her feet light and free in the grass. There were no eyes watching her, no judgment, no obligations, just the wind, the sky, and her. The music played in her mind, the melody of a life she had never allowed herself to live. A life unshackled. A dance that was hers and hers alone. Emily spun, her arms wide, the wind lifting her in an embrace as she finally danced for herself. Without fear, without guilt. She had no idea where this road would take her, but for the first time in her life, she was free to go wherever she wished. And that was enough. If you enjoyed the story, please give it a like and consider subscribing for more content like this. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what you think of the story. Your feedback means a lot.